Diana had been working as a cleaning lady for 3 months, but she still couldn't get used to the atmosphere in the trading company office. That was mainly due to the fact that most of the employees there were rather contemptuous towards people who they thought were below them on the social ladder. After her painful divorce, Diana had to provide for herself and was thus forced to become a cleaner. Richard played her for a pretty long time, but eventually, it turned out that the man had another family. Diana suspected that he could be having an affair, but she truly believed that everything would work out eventually and life would return to normal. The young woman repeatedly found some other woman's hair on her husband's clothes, and once she even found a lipstick stain on his shirt. Of course, Richard immediately came up with a plausible explanation, blaming it on long business negotiations and some other incomprehensible nonsense. Diana put up with her husband's lies for a long time. If someone else had been there in her place, they would have probably gotten divorced much sooner. Eventually, Richard came clean and told Diana that he was leaving her to be with his other family. The news came as an extremely painful blow for Diana, who valued the comfort and warmth of the family home more than anything else in life. Few people knew that the reason why Richard decided to get divorced was the fact that his wife couldn't have children. In all fairness, it should be said that Diana never went to see a doctor, so it was hard to be sure of anything. Nevertheless, Richard claimed that his wife was infertile, even though he could have just as easily have been the one with the problem. "I'm leaving, Diana. Since I'm the one to buy this house, you have 2 weeks to move out," the man announced without further ado. Diana was making dinner at the time. She was so surprised that she even dropped the spoon. "What do you mean you're leaving? Why?" the woman asked, barely managing to keep her emotions in check. Of course, Richard refused to explain anything and simply went into another room. And Diana remained standing at the stove as if glued to the place. Bitter tears flowed down the woman's cheeks, but they didn't bring her any relief. Richard was Diana's closest person in this world. Having been raised at an orphanage, the young woman valued family like no one else, as having one was her most cherished dream of her life. And now, because of her cheating husband, Diana found herself back on the sidelines of life, which seemed so stable and predictable just recently. Since the young woman couldn't bear staying in the same house as Richard, she packed her things and left the house the very next day. Shortly before her divorce, Diana started attending management classes, but after everything that happened to her, she couldn't find the strength to continue with her studies. Of course, leaving school was the most unfortunate mistake Diana made in her life, but she didn't understand it until later, when the pain caused by the separation subsided a little. Since renting a house was rather expensive, Diana had to find a job, and quickly. Unfortunately, being young and inexperienced, the woman couldn't find a job for a long time. Diana had to go around about a dozen potential workplaces before fortune smiled upon her when she met Alfred Moore, a director at one of the city's trading firms. Since the company didn't need any more managers, the businessman offered the young woman the cleaner position. "I get this isn't your dream job, so I'll understand if you decide to reject my offer. However, we do always pay out the salary on time, and no employee has ever complained about it," Mr. Moore added. Lowering her eyes in embarrassment, Diana weighed all the pros and cons, after which she accepted the offer. "Thank you, Mr. Moore. I'll take the job." The next day, armed with a rag and a mop, Diana diligently cleaned the entire office, mopping the floors and dusting the window panes. Despite the fact that the director of the company treated the new cleaner very kindly, the other employees weren't nearly as nice. Endless ridicule and contemptuous remarks poured from their mouths, and there seemed to be no end to them. It was unclear why they disliked Diana so much, but it was most likely because of her poverty. Diana didn't have money to buy expensive clothes, and therefore she had to make do with things she could get at the flea markets and thrift stores. However, the young cleaning lady wasn't bad looking at all. If she were to wear an expensive evening dress, she could easily have passed for a model or an actress. Diana's salary was just enough to pay rent and buy some basic groceries, but the poor young woman had to skimp on everything else. Time passed. Since winters in Maine are often harsh, the residents of the city were used to the fact that snowstorms and ice were integral companions of their life during this time of year. One day, as she was on her way home from work, Diana got into a strong snowstorm. It was 14 degrees outside, which forced the townspeople to wrap themselves in warm blankets and fur coats. Since Diana's clothes were hardly warm, she had to huddle in the cold wind and virtually run down the street. Hurrying to get home as soon as possible, the woman involuntarily became a witness to a strange scene that unfolded right before her eyes. There was an older man walking down the street who was dressed even worse than Diana. He looked as if he had walked all the way from Los Angeles. The man's shabby little coat couldn't save him from the piercing wind, which only became stronger with every second. The old man was thin and pale, and it seemed that the cold wind could pick up his weak body at any moment and spin it into its snowy whirlwind, like a dove feather. Immersed in their thoughts, passers-by hurried to get to the warmth of their homes as soon as possible, which could protect them from the raging weather. And only this elderly man was walking without a specific purpose, hoping to find some shelter and a hot cup of tea. At the sight of the freezing old man, Diana's heart sank. "Dear God, he's going to get frostbite or pneumonia," the woman whispered. Meanwhile, the wind and snow only intensified. Casting aside all of her doubts, Diana went up to the old man and took him by the hand. "Come with me, sir. Don't say anything. You need to save your strength. My house is within walking distance. Let's hurry up before we get completely covered in snow." "Let's hurry up before we get completely covered in snow," Diana exclaimed, trying to outsound the noise of the wind. The old man looked gratefully at his savior and followed her dutifully. The elderly man understood that the young woman was right, and he didn't waste any time on empty talk. Supporting the old man by the hand, Diana led him down the snowy street. The wind howled and threw lumps of sticky snow into their faces. It was only then that Diana realized that she had actually saved the old man's life. If he had stayed on the street just a little longer, he would have needed an ambulance to save him. And now, 10 minutes later, he was sitting by the burning fireplace in Diana's cozy home. First of all, the woman brought a warm blanket for her guest, after which she poured him a hot cup of tea sweetened with honey. "Thank you, miss. If it weren't for you, I'd have a very hard time out there," the old man said, brushing away a tear. "Don't worry about it. You don't have to thank me. Anyone would have done the same thing in my place." Diana brushed him off. The old man went silent for a while and then shared his story with the young woman. At first, Diana thought that he was simply making it all up, but after he finished the story, she changed her mind completely. As it turned out, the elderly guest's name was Charles. The old man didn't know his last name for the simple reason that he didn't remember anything that had happened to him until 3 months ago. "Homeless people found me in a roadside ditch. They named me Charles. My head was broken, and there wasn't a single cent in my pockets. My ID and phone were all missing. But the worst thing was that I lost my memory. Ever since then, I'd been wandering the streets. I tried to go to the police, but they threw me out. They simply didn't believe me," the guest added with a sob. Diana shook her head sympathetically and caught herself thinking that she would certainly do whatever she can to help this poor man who found himself in such an unfortunate predicament. Of course, Diana didn't know how exactly she was going to do it, but her desire to help was sincere and selfless. The decision to let the elderly man stay at her house came spontaneously and seemed like pure madness. But on the other hand, Diana felt in her heart that this old man wouldn't survive alone on the street and would eventually freeze to death out there. To begin with, the young woman suggested for her guest to take a bath and shave. Diana wanted to make sure the old man looked decent before she took his picture to post on social media. The young cleaner had long realized that the possibilities of the internet were virtually limitless and that it could solve nearly any problem. When Charles finally cleaned up, he immediately turned into an intelligent-looking old man with gray, slightly sad eyes and aristocratic features. "Well, he's definitely not homeless. He looks like some congressman or an actor," Diana thought with a smile. Having posted Charles's photo on several social media pages at once, the woman breathed a sigh of relief. "Well, that's better. Now all there's left for us to do is wait." The old man thanked his savior once again and apologized for such an intrusion into her life. The next day, Diana went to work as if nothing had happened. For some inexplicable reason, she wasn't afraid to leave Charles alone in the house. She was sure that he was an honest and decent man. Having heard what she did, people at the office simply laughed at her. "You're a gullible idiot. You left a homeless man in your house alone? Rest assured, he's either going to rob you blind or burn your house to the ground." Diana blushed to the very roots of her hair and mentally scolded herself for talking too much. She spent the rest of the day getting mocked by all the managers of the office. Diana's mood was hopelessly ruined, and it seemed that nothing in the world could make her feel better. But imagine the young woman's surprise when she got home and saw a bunch of expensive cars parked by her house. "What in the world is this?" the woman thought anxiously. Everything became clear a little later when a tall young man in a business suit got out of the first car. Seeing Diana, he stepped closer and introduced himself. "Austin Thompson, miss. I saw your post on social media and arrived as soon as I could. We had to travel about 600 miles, but it's nothing compared to the fact that I found my missing father." "Your father? Charles is your dad?" Diana exclaimed in surprise. "Actually, my father's name is Larry. He owns a network of trading companies throughout the Northeast. He went on a business trip to Maine 3 months ago, and no one had seen him since. I looked all over the country for him, but I never managed to find him," Austin said, having a hard time keeping his emotions in check. The man's story seemed so incredible that Diana even started doubting whether it was true. However, her doubts were dispelled when Austin showed her their family photographs, in which his father was captured with his relatives. There are no words to describe how happy and relieved Larry was to see his son, especially since he remembered everything from his past as soon as he saw Austin. On that fateful day, the elderly businessman was mugged. It was only by some incredible chance that he even managed to stay alive. The muggers took Larry's car, his ID, and his phone and disappeared into the night. If it weren't for the homeless people, the elderly businessman would have probably remained lying in the dirty ditch until he died. Feeling incredibly happy for Larry and Austin, Diana couldn't hold back her tears. Everything that happened seemed like a true miracle, but in fact, the miracle was still ahead of the young woman. In gratitude for the help, Larry Thompson invited Diana to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city so they could discuss her future. The elderly man had decided to open a help center for the homeless people and people who found themselves in difficult life situations, and he wanted Diana to be in charge of it. The young woman was beyond shocked at such an unexpected turn of events. Having quit her job, the former cleaning lady began a new life in which there was no more ridicule and social injustice. Rumor has it that a romantic relationship developed between Diana and Austin, which made Larry Thompson incredibly happy. Only time will tell if those rumors are true, but there's no doubt that Diana and Austin deserve to be happy, and that if they were to get married, there would be one more happy family in our world.